Let's go straight away to Dr. Sebastian Gorka, calling in from the White House, Deputy Assistant to President Trump, and full disclosure, the former editor of national security at Breitbart News. Dr. Gorka, a lot to get through today because I have to ask you about a couple domestic issues, though I know your area of expertise is national security and foreign policy, but there's just too much out there. But let's start with the news that broke overnight that another activist judge is standing in the way of President Trump's executive action on immigration, trying to preserve security, trying to have a reasonable vetting process in the United States. Well, you've got more judges trying to read the president's mind and to declare that it is a Muslim ban, and he's trying to do this because he is discriminatory and does not like people with brown skin. That's the implication. Dr. G, well, what do you say to these judges, and what's the plan to deal with them?
It's very simple, Alex. There is absolutely no way on God's earth that they can make that case that this is something to do with xenophobia or a religious group. There is not one instance on the campaign trail or after the president took office in which the travel suspension was mentioned without reference to national security. Never mentioned. It was never mentioned. We're doing this because of a certain religious group. In every single instance, every campaign speech, every statement out of the White House after January 20th, this measure was the link to the security of the United States. National security is the prerogative of the commander-in-chief, and immigration, including immigration standards and the issuance of visas, is not a local, is not a federal, is not a judicial function. It is a function of the White House and the executive arm. So this measure or this attempt to block a national security executive order will fail.
Yeah, I think it will too. It's just such a interesting moment in time where we are, where you've got so much adversarial, so many people who are adversarial to the president who want to destroy his administration, and they're willing to act unethically. And it's not just limited to the Democratic Party. It's the Democratic Party. It's all child's play relative to what you're seeing from the judiciary and from the establishment press that claim neutrality, that claim that they are neutral and unbiased and are blind to and simply looking for the facts and are blind to biases. And these are the people who are continuing to cause problems for this administration are the activist bench and the media. It's a pretty interesting moment in time where the opposition to the president isn't simply the Democrats.
Yeah, this is a fabulous point because it illustrates exactly the depth of the problem. If we truly believe in a republic, if we believe in checks and balances, and if we believe in separations of power, then the executive cannot bring constitutional decisions. That's the job of the Supreme Court. Judges cannot behave as if they are the executive and determine what is good for the national security of the United States. When they proceed to do so, they have stepped out of their mandate. They've stepped out of the way we constructed this country originally. And this is a perfect case study of just how much politics has intruded into the judicial sphere. And as such, we have to welcome it because this is when the scales fall from the eyes of many, many Americans. And we understand that this isn't about the law. This isn't about the judicial process. This is about politics, Alex.
Yeah, I think it is too, and we will see how the president reacts to this, and we'll be waiting anxiously to see what comes next. But I do think this executive order will ultimately make it through in one way or another, but it is just so much effort where the president tries to do the simplest thing that is so clearly constitutional based on any reasonable reading, but it gets blocked by mind readers on the bench. Anyway, digressing a little bit, Mr. G. Okay, let's get to a couple other topics. Today is budget day, very exciting, and I have to say the headlines are looking unbelievable. I've been reading them from all sorts of different publications, but it looks like in a nutshell the theme is pretty clear. Raise military spending, cut spending from the various agencies. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. So if there's one thing in the meeting that I've been a party to with the president in the last 8 weeks, one of the most driving issues for him again and again and again is waste, is just the gargantuan amount of waste we have inside the U.S. government. That's why we have our rule that you can't bring an executive order, you can't bring a new regulation unless two are rescinded in its place. And that's why we're concentrating on what really matters, national security, after 8 years of cuts, of 8 years of undermining our armed forces, and saving money where we can. So, this is, when you are as successful as Donald J. Trump was in the private sector, the bottom line really matters. And this is a man who cares about national security, but also cares about your pocketbook. Whether you voted for him or not, he is driven by saving money for the U.S. taxpayer. And that's what you're going to see in the new budget.
Yeah. Okay. So you're going to see a lot of increase in military spending. What in particular is he looking to restore?
Well, the biggest issue right now is the operations. So how effective our combat readiness? If you look at the fact that this is out there, it's in the open source. The Marine Corps, for example, is having to cannibalize not old aircraft, but cannibalize current usage aircraft that are in current use to keep other aircraft flying. That is just untenable. This is the United States of America. We don't do that. So that one of the key priorities is going to make sure that our warfighters have what they need to prosecute their mission.
Okay. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to President Trump. So one thing, and again, I'm not going to grill you too hard on this one because you're the national security guy, but one thing that'll be a continuing source of curiosity, particularly for the Breitbart audience, is this $1.1 trillion infrastructure plan that is out there. And this is the sort of thing where I think a lot of people will be open-minded to the president. They have faith in the president. But the idea of the government pulling off a $1.1 trillion infrastructure plan, I think, strikes some of us as unfeasible. That said, the question is simple. What is the return on investment? If the return on investment is a big boost in morale, a big boost in GDP, a big boost in tax revenue, I think this could be an incredible legacy for the president. But he's going to have to sell it to the American people, and then he's going to have to prove that it works. It's a big bet. Do you have any thoughts on this at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as somebody who travels a fair bit, you just have to understand that if you go around other parts of the world, whether it's Europe, whether it's Asia, whether it's elsewhere, we have lagged behind. We have seen our infrastructure not looked after in recent decades, and it simply is not at the standard that would match our role in the world. So, number one, there is a problem. Number two, when the president first announced this initiative, he chose his words very, very carefully, and he didn't say it's $1 trillion worth of taxpayer money. He said there will be this initiative, but it's not all going to come out of your pocket, and that's very important to understand, that we are looking at more than just the federal budget to fund these kinds of measures. And then lastly, it's not pork barrel. It's not simply projects, bridges to nowhere. It's about getting America back on track. And infrastructure is essential to that. You can concentrate on jobs for Americans. You can concentrate on the automotive industry. You can concentrate on manufacturing. But if you can't move those people, if you can't move those materials, then it's only one small part of the national economy. So infrastructure is it's the veins, it's the system, it is the lifeblood of the economy. And that's why, all told, it will be, as you said, I think you used the word, a great legacy.
Okay, so the other question that I had on this topic, and again, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to the President, and we're talking about some of the proposals that President Trump has made, is this something that he's introducing now because he's trying to change the news cycle, or is this something that he is just he's ready to go on this? And I ask this because he's been such an effective media manipulator. where he's playing at a level that seems to be above the rest of the establishment press. Who knows what happened with the Rachel Maddow tax release? It seemed like a huge win for President Trump there. But in particular, I want to ask you about the latest round of wiretapping claims. It's President Trump's claim that Obama wiretapped him. Whether or not this was a media tactic or something he truly believes, I don't know the answer. I'm not going to ask if you do. But one thing that's for certain is this has certainly slowed down the Russia conspiracy theory talks from the establishment press. It's a very effective tactic. Now, do we know the truth? Do we have any semblance of understanding who wiretapped whom? What was the extent of it? And is this a good use of everyone's time to continue to talk about it and investigate it?
Well, I'm not going to speak for the president, but as somebody who works in the national security sphere, I'm really concerned with this issue in general. So two questions. We have now had for months and months and months and months this obsession, this talk, this insinuation of the Russian connection. But to what? Where's the smoking gun? What is the former administration and their lackeys in the media actually positing? Because there's no there. A phone call was made to an ambassador, okay? But what else is there? There's nothing. So that's why the president says, okay, you want to open this can of worms? Let's look at the whole issue. Let's go right back to Russian involvement on left and right as far back as the beginning of the Obama administration. Let's shine light on this issue. But there's a deeper one. There's a deeper problem. When we know that highest level sensitive intelligence, transcripts of conversations with U.S. individuals are being given lock, stock, and barrel to the mainstream media, that is what we call the political exploitation of intelligence. That's not what happens in banana republics. That's what happens in authoritarian nations. And that is something that we must look into. When you start to use the intelligence community's assets or their product for partisan political purposes, you undermine the whole democratic system. And that's why we want to shed light on all of these issues to finally stop this kind of perverted exploitation.
Why do you think it is that the Democratic Party and the establishment press are so determined to create hostility between the Trump administration and Russia? And I ask you this specifically, Dr. Gorka, because Breitbart has really had mostly a negative line on Russia, and that includes your tenure as national security editor. Your successor, Francis Martel, probably even more vehemently anti-Russia. And I just wonder why the Democrats have decided to push this conspiracy theory that Trump and Russia are one and the same.
Yeah, this is a wonderful question, and I can't. You'd have to ask Ben Rhodes. You'd have to ask John Podesta.
Yeah, let's see if they'll come on the show, producer Paul. Let's try to book Ben Rhodes and Podesta for tomorrow. We'll do long form.
I think there's a couple of potential explanations. Number one, I think with regards to Syria, I think some personal animus was built up between Moscow and the last administration. And beyond that, I think it's laziness. I think it's scapegoating. As you know, I'm going to take, I take umbrage that you're saying that Francis is a stronger line than I did, but we can talk about that later.
Fair enough.
My family history is very clear. So, what my parents went through under communism and et cetera. But the bottom line is, they need an explanation for why they lost. If you cannot admit that your candidate was an appalling candidate that lost because she had no message except I'm a woman and I deserve to be president, you're going to have to find an answer as to why she was trounced. And the easiest one is Russia, WikiLeaks, the KGB, the SVR, everything else. So I think it's handy, it's easy, it's lazy, it's scapegoating.
Great explanation. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to President Trump and our former national security editor at Breitbart News. Always a pleasure to speak to Dr. Gorka. Thank you, sir. We'll catch up with you later on.